So we're in the middle of a series called Jesus Is, and we started that a couple of weeks ago, really focusing on the I am statements that Jesus makes, saying who he is. And last week we explored Jesus is the bread of life, where he says, I am the bread of life. And obviously Gareth, who loves his food, introduced that session to us. But this week we are focusing on Jesus, the light of the world. And throughout the book of John, we see lots and lots of examples of John's imagery of light. Now, I haven't got lots of time this morning to go through every single verse in John that talks about light. We would be here till this evening. But I'm going to flash them up to you so you can see some of the examples in John of where John describes light before we get to the big statement that Jesus makes. So in John 1, we find that John describes a life that was the light of all mankind, the light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John came as a witness to testify concerning that light, talking about John the Baptist. John himself was not the light, but came to testify about the light. And John the Baptist being there before Jesus arrived, declaring that the light was coming. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. And I'm going to pause there, because when you think of Jesus, light of the world, straight away, what time of year do you think of? Winter? Anything particularly when we think of Jesus, the light of the world? When do we talk about this a lot? Christmas, that's it. Christmas. We often think about this at Christmas, and I've definitely preached a message about this at Christmas before. But when you actually look at the context that John is talking about, when he's talking about Jesus, light of the world, which we'll get to in a moment, it's actually quite significant, the story that he uses to unpack this. But you go on to John chapter 3, Jesus and Nicodemus. John chapter 3, this is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. John 3 also talks about everyone who does evil hates the light, but will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. John 3 also talks about whoever lives by the truth comes into the light so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. Then we go on to chapter 8, and this is the first example of when Jesus talks about, I am the light of the world. Jesus declared, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of light. The light of life. And that's the first time we read that statement in the book of John. But I'm going to jump today very much into a story that we're going to focus on in John chapter 9, verse 5. You'll find it. Jesus again says, while I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And he says that statement in the context of a story about a man who is born blind. And we're going to jump into that in a moment. Just going to quickly highlight to you in chapter 11, John doesn't stop talking about light. He really loves this metaphor and the imagery that it produces. Jesus answers, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light at all. So that whole concept of we can't see clearly when we're living in the dark, but that Jesus came to bring light. And then we go on to chapter 12. John is still highlighting light and the things that Jesus said about light. John 12, Jesus told them, you are going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light before the darkness overtakes you. Believe in the light while you have it, so that you may become children of light. Then it goes on to say, I have come into the world as a light, so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. Aren't you thankful today that we don't have to live in darkness? We don't have to live in our sin, in our shame, in the things in our life that we know are dark, because Jesus came to rescue us. He came to save us and to bring us into the light of life with him. Amen. So we're going to be unpacking this a bit more. If you're like sitting there thinking, I've never really thought about this before, that's okay too. We're going to be unpacking this in the context of looking at John chapter 9, If you've got your Bibles, you might want to turn there I'm going to start at verse 1. I'm going to read from verse 1 down to 12, and then we're going to delve into this story that Jesus shares as he talks about, I am the light of the world. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sin or his parents' sin? It was not because of his sin or his parents' sin, Jesus answered. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. We must quickly carry out the tasks assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming, and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. Then he spit on the ground, made mud with saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. He told him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. Siloam means sent. So the man went and he washed and came back seeing. His neighbours and others who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? Some said he was, and others said, no, he just looks like him. But the beggar kept saying, yes, I am the same one. They asked, who healed you? What happened? He told them, the man that they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and told me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. So I went and washed, and now I can see. Wow, just imagine for a moment, you're that man, and your friends are coming up to you. What's happened? You're just going to be so excited. Like, I was blind, and now I can see. What an incredible miracle to see happen. Not just for the people around him, but in his own life. I want to take you into this story through a different perspective, because we're reading that as a story that John has written, and he's describing what happened. He's describing the miracle that he witnessed. But I want to drash this, and drash is something where you put yourself into the first person of a story. And when you do that, something quite incredible happens, because as you imagine that you are that man sitting there day after day begging, what does that sound like? What does that look like? What does that feel like? And obviously it's a little bit of poetic license here, so not every single thing I'm going to say you're going to find you reading this story. But I've thought a lot about what this blind man would have felt like, what he would have been experiencing. And with a little bit of help from others that have done the same, I've kind of gone, okay, let's look at this in the context of I am, you are the blind man. So I'm going to read it to you. You might want to close your eyes for a moment, because this man is blind, and I couldn't make the room dark, obviously, on a bright sunny day. But close your eyes for a moment. Put yourself in the position of the blind man. You're in complete darkness. You can't see anything. You've been like that since you were born. You think you know what darkness is. You think it's just turning off the bedroom lamp or driving down an unlit country road at night. But your eyes adjust to that kind of darkness. Eventually you see shadows, you see outlines, you see a way out. My darkness didn't have outlines. It didn't have a way out. I was born into it. For 20 odd years, my world was entirely textured. I knew the rough stone of the temple gate where I sat every single day. I knew the metallic, heavy clink of a coin dropping into my tin cup. I knew the heat of the midday sun on my face, but I had absolutely no concept of what the colour yellow or red or green meant. I knew the sound of hurried footsteps brushing past me, thousands of people every day treating me like a piece of the architecture, a theological problem to be discussed, but never a person to be loved. And then he walked past. I heard his followers arguing over me like I was a textbook footnote. Hey, teacher, whose fault is this? Did this guy sin in the womb, or did his parents mess up? I braced myself for the usual religious condemnation. But the teacher, he didn't argue. He just spoke. And his voice, it sounded like authority, but it felt like warmth. He said my brokenness wasn't a punishment. He said my whole life of darkness had been a setup for a massive display of God's glory. Before I could even process that, I heard him spit on the ground. I felt his hands, rough, working man's hands, kneading clay out of the dirt. He reached down. He He smeared the wet mud right over my eyelids. It was cold. It was heavy. It was humiliating. He didn't ask if I wanted it. He just gave me a command. Go, wash in the pool of Siloam. Have you ever tried navigating a crowded, bustling city with mud caked over your blind eyes? People laughing at you, stumbling over curbs, feeling your way through the dirt solely on the word of a stranger you've never seen. But I kept walking. I reached the water. I knelt down, I scooped it up, and I washed the clay away. And for the first time in my life, the light crashed in. I saw faces, I saw trees, I saw the sky. But the crazy thing is, the moment my physical eyes opened, a completely different kind of war started. The religious elite, they didn't celebrate. They were furious. They dragged me into court. They badgered me. They demanded theological answers I didn't have. They wanted me to call my healer a sinner. I told them, look, I don't know theology. I don't know his background, but I know one undeniable fact. I was blind, but now I see. They kicked me out of the temple for saying that. They excommunicated me. But do you know what? The moment the world threw me back into the dark, the light of the world came looking for me again. You know, it's easy for us, isn't it, to read that story just with one perspective, just looking at that as a miracle that happened 2,000 years ago. A miracle that is incredible, that Jesus healed a man's blind eyes. That in itself is enough to go, wow, isn't that incredible? But to actually walk in the footsteps of somebody blind, who's been sitting there since birth at the temple gate, wondering every day, will I even have enough food to eat? Is anyone even going to notice me? And then the day that changes his life is Jesus stops. He takes notice. And the truth is, every single one of us is born just like that blind man. Spiritually blind, sitting by the roadside of life and trapped in darkness that we can't escape ourselves. Before the man can even think to ask for help, Jesus initiates the encounter. He stops at the blind man. He sees where he's at. And our stories, our testimonies, they don't start with us looking for the light. They start with the light finding us exactly where we are. And Jesus, light of the world, as he describes himself, I am the light of the world. He isn't just the light of the world. He wants to be the light of your world. Wherever we are, whatever our darkness might look like, he wants to come and bring light in our darkness. The first thing, there's 3 points I just want to bring from this story as we really focus in on Jesus, light of the world today. The first one is the encounter. The light finds us in our darkness. As Jesus went along, he saw a man blind from birth. The miracle begins when Jesus notices the man. The miracle begins with Jesus' gaze. The blind man, he couldn't see Jesus. He couldn't look out for Jesus. He couldn't even see him. It was the moment that Jesus stops, stoops down, and connects with this man that encounter began. The disciples then, what do? They're looking at the man, and they're actually feeling like, hang on a minute, Jesus, like, who sinned, this man or his parents? And they want to debate the cause of his darkness. Rather than looking at the man who's sitting there helpless, they're like, but whose fault is this? What have his parents done? But Jesus completely redefines the situation. He reveals that the man's suffering is not punishment, but it's a canvas for God's glory. This happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. And I want to encourage you today, if you are suffering, if you are going through a dark situation right now in your life, that God wants to use your story for his glory, that nothing is ever wasted. You know, I know we talk about it a lot, but because we're still going through and we're still journeying and we're still processing, and it's very real because we know what that looks like. 3 years of journeying through something that was hard, that was tough. There were days when we didn't think it was going to end. But you know, in every moment, I can honestly say that God is using that story and that journey that we've been on for his glory and his purposes. And I'm thankful when I read this that Jesus says that it's not his parents' fault. They've not done anything wrong. It's not your fault that you're in the situation that you're in. Sometimes we can't completely understand suffering. Sometimes we don't understand exactly why this has happened to us, why we've had to go through something. Sometimes for some of us, we might just be thinking, when I get to heaven, I'd really like to ask God why we had to go through that. But one thing I know for sure is nothing in our lives is ever wasted. No suffering, no pain, no situation or circumstance. But when we bring God into our lives and we ask him to light up our darkness, he will be with us. He promises to be faithful. He promises to be there through every step of the journey. And I can tell you now, there have been moments in the past 6 months I've talked to other parents that are journeying through things with their children. I've sat down and had conversations with people who years and years and years ago have gone through things. And they've gone, I never really talked to anyone about this, but I've watched your journey. I've watched how you've traveled through this. And I can honestly say there have been moments when I could have sat and gone, I don't really want to talk about this now. But actually, your testimony, your pain, the things in your life that sometimes you're like, oh, it hurts sometimes to talk about. But I know that God's been with me. I know that he's been faithful. Use those stories. Those are the people that will come to you, and you might be the very person they need to speak to them and to show Jesus, the light of the world, to them. An encounter will change our lives forever, an encounter with Jesus. Jesus does not leave us to wander in the dark. He steps into our darkness to reveal his purpose. The second point is obedience. You see, when you actually think about this, that blind man, he was pretty brave. He took a massive step of faith, because when Jesus spits on the ground, makes some mud with saliva, puts it on the man's eyes, and then says, go, wash in the pool of Siloam. The word that Siloam is actually translated into is sent. So he sends him. He says, you've got to go now. And basically, you've got to go and do something about this. He's blind. He's got mud on his eyes now as well. And he has somehow got to get from where he's sitting to the pool. It was a busy city. The pool wouldn't have been miles away. But for somebody blind, trying to get to the next place, it's really challenging. I see that firsthand with my own mum. She can't go anywhere at the moment without one of us guiding her. It's a very real situation. But this man, he knows. He's met the teacher. He knows he's got to go. He knows he has to be obedient to what Jesus has said. And Jesus performs this act of physical recreation of using the dust and the mud. If you remind yourself, you can think about other places in the Bible, like in Genesis, when he forms Adam, you think about that whole kind of concept there that's linked into this. And I'm not going to go deeply into that. Could have a sidetrack right now, but I won't. You get this man who's got this mud on his face, and he's got this awkward walk to do. He walks through the busy streets. He would have looked absolutely foolish. He would have been mocked as he went to the pool. There would have been people that wouldn't have cared an absolute hoot about where he was going or what he was doing, but the blind man knew where he had to go. And the miracle for this blind man is also in his sending, in his going, in his moving. He chooses to be obedient. He chooses to step out in faith and believe that what Jesus has told him to do is also going to be part of his miracle. So the man went and washed, and he came home seeing. The miracle happened in the middle of his obedience. Jesus didn't instantly heal him when he put the mud on his eyes. It required an action from the man to say, I'm going to go to the pool, I'm going to wash my eyes. Imagine him being at that pool, washing his eyes, and for the first time, he is seeing colour, he is seeing trees, he is seeing people's faces. He would have been so excited in that moment. And it was his walk of obedience that took him to the pool. And then he rushes back to tell everybody, look, I'm healed. Look what's happened. It takes acts of faith that when we have to walk the hard roads of life, even if the healing doesn't happen straight away, even if the circumstances don't change straight away, I'm going to keep walking. I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to keep being obedient, whatever messy situation this might look like, Whatever is going on right now in your life, God is still working on your behalf. But what he's asking you to do is to have faith, is to take that step, to turn towards him and not away from him. Experiencing the light requires steps of faith, even if it looks absurd or messy to the people around you. You know, God is hiding some of the greatest miracles on the other side of your willingness to sometimes look a bit foolish, to sometimes look a bit silly, to sometimes actually have to step out and do things that might scare you. God is waiting with those miracles in the middle of our mess sometimes. I just want to encourage you with that. So we've looked at encounter, obedience, and the third and final point I want to make is that the revelation that comes. The light separates the humble from the proud. John 9 verse 39 says, "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." That might sound a little bit harsh, but when you unpack part of this story, you realize that the religious leaders and the people that are watching on, they're not happy about what's happened. And they're actually blind to their own sin. They're blind to their own disbelief. This miracle creates an immediate divide between people. The former beggar, he gains physical sight, and then he gets put into this trial before people, like, who did this and what happened? And he's kind of caught in this moment. But it's really interesting when you read the passage, because at the start of this, the blind man recognizes Jesus as the man in verse 11. Then he calls him a prophet in verse 17. Then in verse 33, the blind man is getting a bit more confident, and now he's actually defending Jesus. He's actually defending who Jesus is and what he's done. And then finally, in verse 38, he's worshipping him as Lord. Isn't that a journey in itself of our faith and our belief? I think for all of us at some point, we would have known Jesus as a man, someone that we talk about, someone that we've heard about, someone that maybe we've read stories about, to recognize that he's a prophet. Wow, some of the incredible things that Jesus has done and the things that were spoken about him. Then getting to the stage where we're defending our faith in who Jesus is. And actually that we recognize that there's more to this man than just being a man, that he is our Savior. And then finally to that point when we're worshiping him, we recognize there's a relationship that happens when we choose to say, Jesus is my Lord. The religious leaders, the ones who claim to see perfectly, to know everything, they're actually descending deeper into their spiritual blindness. They're so trapped in legalism and pride and the way that things should be done that their sight is getting worse. And they don't like what's happened. They don't like the fact that this blind man is declaring that he's been healed. Because for them, the light exposes their own issues. The light exposes the things in life that maybe we don't want other people to see. And it's the same for us. You know, very often, you know, when you've got a little bit of dust in your house, okay, and you, at night time when you've got the lamp on, you know, in the corner of the room, but there's quite a lot of dark corners and shadows, you can't see the dust so much, can you? But when you put the main light on, it's like, whoa, I need to do a bit of cleaning today. Anyone else like that, or is it just me? Yeah, okay. So some of us, we might have no light on at all, and we are just literally sitting in darkness. And I'm talking about this metaphorically now. So in our lives, we might just be sitting in a place of darkness. Maybe we've never even accepted Jesus into our lives, and we're just sitting in the dark. And maybe some of what I'm saying today is like a light bulb starting to switch on, that actually Jesus came to be the light of our world, of your world, of my world, of the world. But then I also think there's some of us that we put the lamp on in the corner. So we know a bit about Jesus. We've experienced some of his work in our own lives. We've seen that in the lives of people around us. But the light's on over here. But over here, there's stuff we really don't want anyone to see. There's stuff we haven't dealt with. There's stuff that maybe is sin in our lives. Or there's just dark stuff that we just don't want to go there. Jesus wants to put the main light on in your life today. And in exposing the light and the things in our lives that we might find challenging for him to see, he's saying, I want to light up every part of your life, the nooks and the crannies, the bits you don't want anyone else to see. Because when we allow Jesus to bring light into every area of our lives, yes, it can expose some of the areas that we need to deal with. But with that, he comes with his love and with his peace and with his strength and with hope that we can only find with Jesus, light of the world. This blind man, he has that encounter. He steps out in faith and walks in obedience, and then that revelation fully comes. If we're willing to admit our spiritual blindness, Jesus' promise is that he will flood your life with his light. Jesus spoke to the people and said, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. I'm going to ask the band to come up. And we're coming to land now, but I just want to remind you today, for some of you, this is like the first moment maybe when you're like, do you know what? I need Jesus' light in my life. I want to accept Jesus, the light of the world, to brighten up my life in its fullness. For others, maybe you just had the lamp on, but you're like, I know I need to come back to that place of turning the full light on so that Jesus can light up every part of my life. Jesus didn't just come to be the light of the world, but he came to be the light in your world. A light to guide us, a light to protect us, a light to keep us safe, a light that will bring us joy and hope and everlasting love and peace. A light that will shine in every situation and every circumstance. Whatever darkness you're walking through today, when we put Jesus, the light of the world, in his rightful place in our lives, there is no darkness that will overcome you. There is no moment in your life where the light disappears. It's always there.